Hi, everyone, and welcome to part 4 of our 5-part Q&A. Thank you for taking the time to tune into the conversation today. We are together today to recognize World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. We will begin by acknowledging the lands in which Seneca's campuses are located, the land stewarded by the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and Wendat nations. We acknowledge Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississauga and Chippewa First Nations. We are all interconnected as treaty people with shared obligation to learn, respect, honor, and sustain. Many of you may also be joining us from all over Turtle Island and around the world. We encourage you to seek out whose ancestral lands you are on today. Now, before we get started, it is important to recognize the heaviness that these topics and conversations can carry and the impact this can have. We'll be hearing today from a survivor of trafficking in the sex industry, and we'll be touching on what trafficking looks like and the impact trafficking can have on survivors. If you need a moment, please take some time and step away. And if you'd like to access support, please contact me at kristen.haynes@senecacollege.ca or access the on or off campus resources provided at the end of the Q&A. And to that note, we are so grateful to have our guests here with us today to speak to us about what trafficking is and what it looks like in the Canadian context. PPP, or originally People Puzzle Pieces, is a survivor of intrafamilial sexual abuse, and through this abuse, she was trafficked throughout Southern Ontario and Michigan. She also lives with dissociative identity disorder, or DID. The name People Puzzle Pieces is from her experience of DID, where each part of her personality becomes a part of the full picture. PPP is at a point in her healing where she is now an advocate for anti-trafficking education and awareness, sharing her experiences in order to help others understand both trafficking and DID, and to spread her message of hope for those who may have experienced interpersonal abuse and trafficking. Thank you so much for being here with us today to share your story.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share this information and make sure that everyone is aware of what's happening today.
Thank you so much. So we'll jump into question 4. Survivors of trafficking can experience significant impacts related to complex trauma. This can include psychological, emotional, physical, social, interpersonal, and developmental impacts. Can you expand on what those impacts may look like from a survivor perspective?
Yeah, this is a big one. So all these different areas are definitely affected by the abuse that I've experienced and the trafficking in particular. Psychologically, I've been diagnosed with different disorders, including DID. What DID is where the mind is overwhelmed with trauma, and then it will take that trauma and store it away in different pockets in the brain, which then develop into their own entities, which can sometimes form into personalities. And so all these different parts of my personality are separated, and we have to learn to work together. So that, as you can imagine, is a very difficult disorder to deal with, particularly because you lose time when you're not the main personality who's fronting at that time. And so it feels like you're losing time and you don't know what happens for certain periods of your life. And also, I've experienced anxiety and depression. I've gone through different mental health programs in order to help me with those issues. I was mistakenly diagnosed as having schizophrenia, which often happens with people with DID because of hearing voices and things like that. So many different psychological problems that can develop due to this complex trauma. Emotionally, it's very taxing. Your emotions are very hard to regulate because trauma is happening constantly, over and over again. And so your emotional development just doesn't go according to what the typical person might experience. And so as you grow, it becomes very difficult to deal with different overwhelming emotions. Physically, I've experienced different physical traumas, including, head trauma, different traumas to different parts of my body. Certainly there's different sexual health issues, physically affected that way. And just having constant chemicals dumped into your system due to stress definitely takes a toll on your physical health as well. Socially and interpersonally certainly are affected. Growing up with such severe trauma happening in my life, I had a very difficult time trusting anyone. And so making friends and being able to trust people out in the world just doesn't happen very easily. And so when you're trying to figure out how to work in the world, and as you grow and get a job, or if you're still in school, it becomes very difficult to relate to other people because you are experiencing a totally different life than what they may be experiencing. And so it's just really difficult to relate to other people. As far as developmental impacts go, that would be a lot of, again, just different chemicals being dumped into your system, affecting your growth, affecting your health. There's different issues that I've had throughout my life as far as health goes, and pretty well every one of them can be traced back to abuse in some way. So it certainly affects every aspect of your life, of your development, of your emotional experience, and it just really affects the way you look at the world, and not being able to trust the world in the way that you need to in order to function well.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And as we can see, the trauma, the complex trauma, and kind of the impacts that survivors of trafficking experience, you can really see that complexity of that and where it does kind of impact kind of every area of a person's life and development. And especially if we're talking about someone who has been trafficked or exploited as a young person, kind of what that means, kind of developing into adulthood as well. I'd like to swing back just quickly to your experience living with DID. And for people who might not understand what dissociation is, can you speak a bit to kind of what that means in everyone's day-to-day life? Because at some point we all kind of dissociate. So can you kind of explain what that means and link that into kind of your experience living with DID?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, everyone dissociates. So it could be as simple as you driving home from work or school, and you've done the same route over and over and over again, and you realize you've gotten home, and you don't remember going through those lights that you had to go through. Were they green? Were they red? What were they? And you just don't remember because you were dissociated at the time. So your mind sort of turns its attention to something else while you're still functioning in the world. When it comes to dissociative identity disorder, what happens is that while this trauma is taking place, your mind drifts to another area. So oftentimes when people speak about trauma, they speak about this floating feeling, or this feeling of being in the corner of the room rather than in the body, or just being just above the body, or being slightly separated in some way from the experience. And so that's what dissociation is. So when you're constantly using this coping strategy, and that's really what it is, the coping strategy sort of takes over and develops its own life.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for everyone. Thank you to everyone for tuning in today. And thank you, PPP, for being here with us today. Thank you for sharing your experiences and for providing us with so much information to take away and reflect on. Again, if any folks listening in would like to access support, please contact me at kristen.haynes@senecacollege.ca or access the on or off-campus resources provided.